Yeah. Yeah, that one. I printed it. All right, I'd like to call to order this 12-14 meeting of the Capital Improvements Planning Committee. I've got 3:31. Justice Noel, Cheryl, Tom, Holly. Thanks for coming. We have, I had asked for this meeting last meeting because I thought there was a lot more to consider. And oh, I'm sorry. Let's get a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks, Tom. So asking for another meeting just because I think there was a lot more that we needed to discuss to include the leases. So thank you for emailing all the information about the leases. So for today's agenda, we've got we'll have minutes for the next meeting, and we've got 2 more meetings, one more alone to finalize the recommendation, and then we've got a joint one with the select board on the 28th. I think it's scheduled for. So we've got today, the next meeting, to make sure that we've got everything together. I'll put hopefully by then we'll have a good idea of which direction we want to go to. I'll have a draft report for us to approve, and then we'll be ready for the meeting with the select board. So today we've got, we have a late file rec committee. And then we'll work on developing recommendations based on our discussion last week, which was considering everything that we've had, considering the funding sources, I know people wind up having conversations, single person-to-person conversations, or asking questions outside of the meeting. So through different discussions, we just want to make sure that we're all on the same sheet of paper for what do we really have for revenue to consider for capital planning, and then work on developing those recommendations, and we can adjourn. I think we have to be out of the room by a certain time because there is a select board meeting later on this evening. So taking it in order, we have a late file that's and Candace Graves is here from the rec committee. You can come up to the table, Candace, if you'd like. And then you should have in your email, you should have received the Gilman Waite the pictures that she had. And I think we already had one other from community services in rec for the, what was it?
The water sprinkler.
Yep. She called it a water cannon. I think I saw that.
Yeah, it's called a water cannon.
Water cannon, and
Yeah.
that was for.
Well, they had one before. Somebody asked me where that one went.
It's broken. It cannot be repaired. And there's no way to water. And we totally needed it this year.
What's the where's the location of this one?
I think Bob has it at DPW.
Okay.
I believe.
We'll have to figure out like surplus and what for disposal, whether we can get any money out of it, whether it's scrap or otherwise. Maybe we can use that money towards the cost of a new one.
Because we have the well system, so even in the drought, we could have been able to save the fields, the condition, they were bad. But we couldn't because we had no way to water it.
Yeah, about 12 grand, 11, a little over 11 grand.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, what do you got, Candace?
We have the tennis court. Went to the, I'm on the CPC for the rec commission. I'm a member of the CPC, and I did the needs, and I was asked to come and give you guys a rundown on this. So, there's many things. I mean, we're getting the bathrooms. They passed that to finish that, and we have some funding to do, the concession. But in the park itself, I mean, there are other properties in the town that probably need some TLC, but in the park itself, right now is, soon to be a major hazard is the tennis court. The tennis court is in very bad shape. I went down there this afternoon, took some more pictures. It is a double court, so you play 2 games. There is a lot of, somebody tried to put tar in between the cracking, so it didn't really help because the grass just came up underneath the tar because it wasn't the same substance as the actual, but it needs to be resurfaced. The fence is in pretty bad shape as well. The fencing could be, maybe parts of it could be salvaged, to reinforce. If that was not funding that we have to fix it, but it definitely needs maintenance. The tennis court needs TLC. The rec department did a rec commission. We did a poll on our Facebook to ask the community how they felt about the tennis court, what they thought we should do with the tennis court in general, being in bad shape. And the overall consensus was they would like to see it to be a tennis court still. They would also like it to double as a pickleball court as well as tennis. But they felt like there were a few other options. Sometimes the kids do pull in our rec portable basketball hoops and they bring them in there. But even if the tennis court was resurfaced, if people weren't playing, they could still do that. It wouldn't affect and they wouldn't ruin anything in it, but it does need resurfacing. The fencing needs to be taken care of. Otherwise, the condition that it's getting into, it's going to come to a point that we're probably going to have to lock the court up from the public because there is a lot of tripping issues into it. And putting some tar into the cracks obviously does not solve the problem. It's not the same material that it was. You're not really supposed to mix like concrete and asphalt and try to repair it. You're supposed to use you're supposed to have an expert come in and actually repair it the right way, but it was never repaired the right way. So now it's just getting even worse shape. I did put additional pictures today. This one shows, you can see where the lining is, and you can see all the breaking up of it. And then this is just a picture of it a little bit further out. I mean, it has good drainage in it because it's melted. And you can see that the drainage isn't that bad that with this little bit of snow we got. So it's got a good drainage system in it, I believe. And so it can range anywhere from $25,000 to about $120,000 with fencing and netting, and the resurfacing process. Bob is still looking into getting you who knows more locally what it would cost, like a local business, to get a quote from a local business.
Candace, what did you base your estimates on?
There's you can go online and there's programs online that you can run a court in a size, and you can ask, resurfacing, doing a whole court, how much it would cost to do it, and it gives you an idea of it. And if you have any idea about fencing is expensive. So I mean, the fencing, could have been a little bit low on their end, but resurfacing wise, I mean, it depends. I tried to reach out to a school that did a basketball court, but I couldn't get any call back on that. But I looking at it again today when I went down there this afternoon and looking at it, it really looks like a resurfacing project. Maybe the fencing, some sections could do section at a time, or the whole thing, or just really really enforcing it. But
Did CPC say if they'd take on this project?
they said they didn't say no.
Say yes.
They didn't say, they just wanted to have that final numbers for the January meeting to to get an estimate locally to get that number. Basically, they're looking for that final number.
And then part of the
And
process was to come here first.
Yeah,
before you go
I was asked to
as
do,
well.
I was asked to come here
Yeah.
to present it. I guess it's like a thing that you're supposed to do, like,
Yeah.
it's different steps. So I would just ask to come here and present it. I don't know if, this committee can do anything for the, the maintenance and, the rehab of it. It's in our town park. It's huge. It takes a huge amount of space up, and it's one of the first things when you drive around into the parking area that you see, the condition of it. Sometimes the little kids will run into it and stuff. It's, like I said, it's getting to the point where you're tripping in the little cracks and you can't really play because there's no netting for it right now. And it's missing one of the courts is missing that other pole on the end. So even if you had a net, you wouldn't have a place to attach it. So it needs that second pole. I mean, that far one on the bar, because it has 1, 2, and then the third one on the other side is missing. I don't know what happened to it.
Candace, in your, you had it's your estimate sheet where you had them, by numbers. They all say tennis court. Are you looking for help for the tennis court / pickleball
Yeah.
and the basketball?
No, I've looked into doing a multi-court. It seems to be the most feasible would be a tennis court / pickleball. So what you can do is they call it they call it light lining. So when you do the tennis court, you would line it where your boundaries are and stuff, but then you would also line it so that you could tell where the boundaries are for pickleball. And then the net on pickleball is a little bit lower. So you set your net so that you can lower it. Someone suggested that maybe one of the nets could be always, because it's 2 courts, one could be set for pickleball, one could be set for tennis. But then if there was like anybody had a tournament or anything fancy in there, they could lower it for, higher it for tennis or lower it for pickleball. Like I said, I've talked to quite a few people, even in person in our community, and they're all excited. They're like pickleball. They're all excited about tennis. So it seems that I know that there was some talk on how we had one at the center of town when we had it at the school, and then it became something else. Well, that was on a property that would be, no one would go play tennis during school hours because you wouldn't go on the property of school when school is in. So right there, and again, the netting was never replaced when it went down. So when you don't have a net, no one's going to play tennis. But again, that time frame in that particular park area would have been less to even play in that neighborhood because of the school being in session. You would never play when the school is going on. And then the kids in the neighborhood just took it over and became a skate park situation. In this situation, there is no way that no one can play any tennis currently. So they don't. So the kids just, they'll just use it for whatever they want because children are, resourceful. And, but it really needs to be resurfaced to be either tennis court / pickleball, or it has to be taken care of because in a few years, I believe that with the cracks that are in it, we could not liability wise allow people to be in it.
I think basically it's bringing it forward to us is just kind of like a first step so it can go to the CPC to see if they'll entertain the funding on it.
It's recreation. I don't know. I mean, I can't remember certain bylaws I don't know if I can remember any bylaws, right out of the thing, but if there's authorization to do that. Their budget, they've been doing fairly well. I haven't seen them say no to a lot of things. As far as a process, what's the condition of the playground?
The playground? Oh, next to it, it's in great condition. It doesn't seem to have any real needs right now. The basketball court that shares the fencing with it does have one crack in it that someone probably will eventually have to address at some point. Again, I hope that no one uses the wrong elements, because when you do asphalt or you do concrete, you have to have the right element. Otherwise, you're just going to get the water and everything trapped underneath it, and you're just going to create a bigger mass with the situation. I've talked to a few people that work with that kind of stuff, and they've told me that you really need an expert to fix it correctly. Otherwise, you're just going to create more problems. But
You
that
said
one,
that when you were talking about drain in the quote here, you got 25, but you said the drainage was going to be okay. Do you
I
have
think so. I mean, if I just went there, I mean, the
You need
snow just melted and it's not a,
You can't just, it's hard to, you need to
Yeah.
actually study it and look at
yeah.
it. Or somebody that knows.
But I've never seen, in the year I've been in and out of the park doing all the rec stuff, I have not seen it flooded. So it's, I mean, I've seen more flooding in the area over onto the side where the concession stand is near the Connex. That's the only flooding any place that I've seen collect water, because we have good drainage over around the front of the, we have a lot of drains in the front. But whatever the tennis court's doing, even with the thaw last year, I didn't see like a swimming pool in it, you know what I mean? I mean, if it didn't have good drainage, you would definitely have a lot of flooding in it, and we're not seeing that coming from it.
Right, or you're talking about base layers. I would just want to, when I look at how these things are adjoined, the tennis courts, the 2 tennis courts, the basketball court, as it sits right next to the playground,
Right.
it just screams to me project rather than, an renovation on one of them, just to make sure that it's integrated. Therefore, if you change one thing, does it change that, when they did the playground, did they make that assessment with the drainage and otherwise? It may be within what you quoted, the 25 to 120. Might be more than that, but I think if CPC can fund that, I think you're 100% correct. I bet I know the community would wind up benefiting from it. I don't know if it becomes like a larger project, what capital could consider as well.
I mean, said it's
I
good.
don't have any other questions.
I have a
So
question.
yeah, go ahead. Of
Yeah.
course.
When you costed this out online,
Yeah.
did you, were those numbers based on what a private firm would do for a private individual?
Oh, I understand that the state versus, the way we, pay. I know it didn't give me that option.
Give
It
you
didn't
a
ask
generic
me,
rate.
it didn't ask me that option, no. But I believe now that I've been down, like I literally put my eyes like on it today to go in with the mindset of on the project, on looking at it as maintenance wise, what would it need? And looking what I'm looking at. And I just seen Lunenburg did their, I don't know if they did a tennis court, but they did basketballs and stuff up on there. And I watched that during a few years ago when they were doing that, when I was up there for track and field. And they didn't like rip it, like they used a lot of the bare bones to it. And they basically was a resurfacing project. I believe it's a resurfacing project. That's what my gut's telling me looking at it. And then the fencing, like I said, I shook different sections of it. Some are weaker than others, some are stronger than others. But then, you can't really use the fact that, whatever material back 10, 20, 30 years or whenever they put this thing in, it's going to have, rusting looking color to it. So, I mean, the rusting color didn't look like it was affecting the structure. It just looked like the ground was, after time, you have things in the ground, cement, and, we live in New England. It just starts to loosen up, your metal fencing like that.
And I think we should go for both. I mean, you included pictures of both courts.
Yep.
If we were doing one to try and make it worth the while to resurface both, that way they both.
I think you have to do the whole thing. You
Yeah.
don't do it or do the whole thing.
Yeah.
To do half or a piece
Yep.
it's gonna cost you 10 times more, and it's gonna be
Get an architect in there to actually.
Yeah, well, that's what Bob was gonna try to get us some prices on, having someone come in and do a proper estimate.
So that's my next question is, would Bob be able to do this with his men and equipment, or is that just a little bit too big?
I think this particular kind of stuff, I think it's a specialty type of thing. I mean, there's some things that like the fencing, they can help with, I would have believed, but I would feel like whatever material is the surface would be a specialty company. I would assume that specializes in that stuff.
Okay.
Because you have the line, you also have the drawing too. I mean, that's particular.
Any other questions for Candace? Justice?
No.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, only other thing we've got today is to let's Tom, if you want to walk us through the leases.
Sure. The last meeting I was asked to reach out, and I offered to reach out to both Chief Dickey and Bob Zozak on possibilities of what the pricings would be on their apparatus to a lease to purchase. And again, a lease to purchase is basically comes through as the same thing, and it's not something that with municipal leases that you can you give back the vehicle. It's basically, and I think one of them actually spells it out, that the vehicle itself is actually registered and everything in the town's name with a lien from the leasing company if for some reason you did default on the payments. But there's percentage wise and interest wise, there's three different companies actually here, two different companies on the fire department apparatus, and a company on that Bob Zozak's used for his equipment.
Did you just say, after the lease period, you turn back the
No.
vehicle?
No, you
Used to own.
you own the, it's least
Okay.
least to purchase, least to own, and it's you own the vehicle. There is no, it's not like leasing a car where after 3 years you drive it in the lot and drive off the lot with another one. It's after, depending on what you list out, whether it's for 2, 3, 4 years, it is for you end up basically you own the vehicle, and it's, to me, it's the same as a loan.
Yeah.
Even working through with the DEP,
Lease
they
is really
call it
misleading.
a municipal lease is misleading on calling it that, because it's, if you called it a municipal loan, you'd still have the exact same payment process. The percentages actually on the two on the fire lease amounts actually aren't that bad. They're both in the 5s, which for now is pretty good, actually excellent. And the DPW one has an interest rate in the lower 7s on those vehicles. Again, I'm sure that they could shop around, or whoever does the leases in the town would be able to find a company that would work that would the lowest rate possible, I'm sure. Looking at the fire apparatus on the tankers, after speaking with Chief Dickey, I do believe that they could almost, he's got a couple tankers in there. He's got a 3,000 gallon on the road tanker and a forestry tanker, 4-wheel drive off-road forestry tanker. There is a middle ground tanker that he did come up with and put in the lease proposals. It 4-wheel drive 2,000 gallon tanker. At this point, that really probably would serve the combination of the 3,000 and the forestry tanker, being the 4-wheel drive with 2,000 gallons. That did come through at 385, which broken down over whether it be 5 years, that's what a lot of them are. That'd come out to 93,000 a year over that. The other forestry,
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So I'm sorry, the 4-wheel drive 2,000 gallon tanker would fit the bill for the $600,000 tanker and the $185,000.
we certainly could. I mean, ultimately, it'd be best to have the 6,000 gallon tanker and the other one.
Okay,
If we had all the money to purchase.
yeah,
I think if we were to check with Chief Dickey, I think that he'd find that, like everything else, if you're gonna make a compromise, you still want it to be something that the community can use correctly.
yeah.
And I think that the 2,000 gallon on that would potentially, again, I'm not speaking for Dave, having had some conversations with
You're a
him.
fire chief, so.
I think that it is a possibility, and again, it's something that would potentially work out. I think that he also had given us the lease on the forestry truck, which is replacing the 36-year-old forestry truck that also had on a 5-year lease option, was $45,000 a year. Again, that's basically taking care of, well, he had looked for 3, this would be 2. That in itself would be about $140,000 a year. Looking at that. Bob's,
Which capital would cover the first year. And then it would be on OpEx for every year after.
it would, capital would cover, it'd be covered under capital and the payments, and then however the payments, whether they're budgeted into the budget
Yeah.
it could
would
still,
have to be,
It could
unless
be
there
on
was
his
a grant
budget,
or
yeah.
something. Yep,
the,
that's the only devil in the details, the part of it that is.
well, it's kind of like
Yeah.
if, unless, I mean, unless you're gonna buy something with the whole $600,000 or whatever, you still have to take a loan, and it'd go basically the same way as a loan would.
Hmm.
If you were to take a loan on something, like the school, or like, I guess, if you were to buy a house, most people don't buy it out in cash.
Right.
It usually goes through a loan.
Yeah.
And if you lose your job, then, I mean, there are a lot of different aspects to loans, but unfortunately, without having large piles of money, sometimes we need to try to piece together the smaller pieces. Bob's, and again, there are 2 lease companies here. I was just going with the one in my hand. One might be different pricing as far as some is, the percentages are about the same, so I think give or take.
We would be able to swag a number if that became part of the recommendation of the capital.
There's a you could get a number out of the numbers that are right there.
Yeah.
Uh,
A safe number.
Bob's plow trucks. Again, the $200,000 one, if you were to look at a 3-year annual amount, you'd be looking at between 71,000 and 76,000. And on the smaller dump truck for, I believe it was, I'd asked him, I believe it was for it was for building and grounds. The smaller one was 100, the Ford F-550 was 164,000. That would be roughly between 58,000 and 62,000 if you did 3 years. 4-year loans, you'd then be looking at between 55 and 59 for the larger dump truck that Sandy is looking. And you'd be between 45 and 48,000 for a 4-year on the smaller building and grounds truck. So ultimately, those 2 could be purchased for about $100,000 for the 2. So whether you choose, whether the committee chooses to put forward 2, that's, again, it's a discussion for, but looking at just in these 2, trying to pick off larger items, you're looking at someplace in the vicinity of 250. And that took pretty much every apparatus off that's been almost put forward, other than the smaller vehicles.
Yeah.
Again, it depends on what, I think a number of projects on the capital planning list that can be ARPA funded, that are good candidates for
Agreed.
infrastructure, that are good candidates for that.
Agreed.
I think there's some that are, the cable returned earnings. We know that those go through on that.
Right.
There's a fire station study on there that is a infrastructure study, which ARPA funding that's what it basically was for, your infrastructure, to put together a plan. So you have a plan to move forward on some of these, just like the HVAC at the police station. You've got, I think some of it might be to look at what we can knock off ahead of time. And I think with the leases, the lease to own, I guess technically is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
I think that'll allow us to have some money left over in capital planning or free cash for, devices like the water thing for for doing again, actually, I think ARPA is a better source for the common improvements. And that's again, something that is a funding source that should be for that.
Yeah. I always think of the original reason why ARPA existed, and I try and stay with that. I know they went to the extreme opposite end of the spectrum, and they said, as long as you're not using it for debt in those other 4 considerations, go for it. I don't think that towns out there were, buying gumball machines for every town building. I don't know why you like to use that example now. I used it last meeting and it was ridiculous, but I don't think that towns are doing that, but they're certainly looking at the different opportunities. I love to be able to be fiscally responsible to say, what was the intent of these dollars in the first place? So if it had to do with public safety or enabling response, pandemic or certain hazard response for the community, those things are easy to prioritize.
I think resurfacing the parking lots, that's something that, to me, it's putting forward a project, that's something, taking it off a list that we've had with money we won't have again. And it is a project that'll last for 20 more years that's gonna be paved. It's versus what we have right now.
Yep.
Again, that's just my opinion on that. I do feel the lease is working well. I know there's a lot of pros and cons, people like, don't like.
In your community, I mean,
We've run into no issues at all. I think every one of my fire apparatus right now is on lease,
okay,
is leased, the least, or had been on lease, is paid off now at this point.
I don't think.
It's the same as a loan.
Yeah, I don't think Adam would let us use this conference room anymore if we recommended adding, $200,000-$300,000 to.
That's the thing, it goes, it adds to the budget every year after that.
And we're so,
It does,
It's
but
a it's a good
we're
idea.
razor thin.
I think we should use leases too. But it does, to a certain point, we gotta watch how much we're adding.
right, and I was just using the
Right,
numbers as an
exact- no, I
example.
know, I know.
If you add, say you just did, one of these, one of this, you had 70,000 here and 50,000 there. Well, maybe next year, until these get paid off, maybe capital does only have
Less than-
$150,000 instead of 375.
But
Yeah.
the same department heads come in here every single time and they want to prioritize people.
Right.
So if we're talking about $100,000, that's a cop, that's a firefighter.
It is, but I don't think I think we gotta be cautious
But
mixing.
it is.
It is.
If it's $1.5 million public safety budget for police. He's subject to the lump sum disallow. That's when he goes in with the town administrator and says, here's $2 million worth of requirement. And Adam says to him, I got 1.5 million for you. And then they get down, he has to, Mike has to wind up trying to figure out how to get down to that number, maintain manning it or otherwise, and then come in here gritting his teeth to say, I keep telling you, I want another police officer. I don't know, that's my perspective on leases. I think that so I started to do the work, and I think the big one, the big tanker, I think that would be a candidate for it if we could figure out a way to politely ask Adam, please add that to the budget. I think we can, that's something that is unattainable. $600,000 is a lot. That if we want at 1.8 million in ARPA funds, that swallows a lot of that, where we have a lot of other low-hanging fruit on these requests. As I was kind of pushing them to the different columns, I would get behind lease recommendation on that big ticket item. It is interesting because I didn't understand the 4-wheel drive 2,000 gallon gallon tanker. That kind of tweaks it a little bit to say, do you wind up getting a multi-purpose vehicle that fits the bill? Maybe it's not the best for this kind of fire or that kind of situation.
I think it's also something they could keep in service year round too. It wouldn't necessarily just be a forestry item.
Right.
I think they would still be able to use it on road during the
Yeah,
winter time too, as first fires.
Mr. Chair,
Sure.
I have some, I've done a lot of thinking on this. I've had many conversations with Adam and other members of the Board of Selectmen, and I think with the lease, I've stated repeatedly, I've kind of two left brain, right brain on this. Is the downside of it is, the one downside of it is that if you keep leasing year after year, you have less free cash. Am I correct?
no, it's funded the first year with free cash and then it goes on to the operating budget.
Yeah, but you could take, your free cash could be put
That-
towards your operating budget. So ultimately it
But-
could be for the following.
But,
year.
but I will tell you, this community is not in favor of doing that. I've seen so many conversations where we've been very unwilling to take one-time monies and throw it on to the operating budget. Which answers your question the other way. Yes, if you wind up saying that the leases are going to be perpetuated by free cash, therefore the capital's budget every single year. So if we had $300,000 this year and we wind up making recommendations for $150,000 worth of leases. And then Adam says, well, I can't add 150 to the budget. We say, no problem. That 600,000 we think we're going to get next year, we'll decrement it 150 because you'll
Right.
playing the shell game, you'll
Fund
put
it
that
with
money
the
in.
capital, yeah.
That to me is a diminishing point of, I forget what the phrase is, diminishing return. Because we wind up saying the check's in the mail and we're perpetuating the use of that one-time money, and we're trying to get away from that. We're trying to get away from expecting that we're gonna have a certain amount of free cash. It's like we're telling the department heads, we want you to fully expend, but not really. So if you're operating at, we want you to operate at 90, efficiency, 90%, 80, above 80%, but really we want you to operate at 70% efficiency because we need that cash next year because of the ambulance we just bought.
Yeah, but
You see-
that's not running a department correctly, though. To do that to a department. You want your department head to,
I'm making a joke that's why we have free cash right now, is because we have unexpended funds. We don't have if you look at our budget versus actual, we may finish in some departments, we may finish 70-80%. And then the rest of that money winds up getting unexpended. And therefore we go through that calculation and Kelly does her magic at the end of the year and says, here's the money that we get to keep. Here's our free cash.
right, I guess I see on that end. Good old Will Spring on the advisory board, who used to complain about if you have 25% left in your account each year to turn back into free cash, you didn't budget right.
But that's where we're at right now, and we're getting better about that.
Right.
So right now, we're still riding that wave of unexpended, that 25% that the department didn't spend.
Right.
And we're riding that wave, but we're getting to the point where we have a budget process that is building more efficiency. At the same time, we're increasing our deposits to the accounts that should be paying for these things.
Right.
Capital, stabilization, all these different accounts that now have that cushion for the oh crap moments, or a proper life cycle management practice for that. I'll go back. I'll go back to his point of left brain, right brain. I just think that going total, fleet, so majority funded by lease, or a bump in the use of lease, it's not going to do well for our OpEx. It's just going to be more difficult with some of the other requirements that we have. And I really point my hat.
And I agree with that, but I also think that there is a number, kind of an elusive number of that you can use year by year for leasing and not harm the overall budget. And I think that number is maybe about 80 grand. It's a guess. I think that you can have 80 grand in new leases and not really have.
Well, I guess the good news, just to kind of pivot from leases and the discussion of leases, I think I've come up with a course of action where I think we can have our cake and we can eat it too. And it is so very much based on the use of ARPA funds. We don't have television or otherwise, but I wanted to be able to kind of, if everyone remembers some of the past things. So Adam said we can count on $300,000 out of free cash towards capital planning. We also, as a fall town meeting, have a capital, our CapEx, forget the word, sorry, our capital stabilization fund is at 215. Talking with Adam, he understands that, yeah, we would have had in excess of 400,000, but we had that glitch at the fall town meeting where we put a lot more money than we thought we were going to into the demo account. So Adam anticipates that we may, that he may offer or we may request some of using some of the capital, it's not sustainment, stabilization. So 215 in there, and then there's 1.8 million unexpended. And I based that off of the October budget versus actual. I don't think it's changed much. I don't think we had any expenditures. The 1.8 figure already takes into account the police request to use it. What Cheryl did was she took the money out and put it into a different accounting. So if we talked last week about where was that? the kitchen upgrades, like there's $6,300 of ARPA funds that have already been put towards kitchen upgrades. So the 1.8 figure represents actual usable cash. So let's see. And then we also discussed about $87,500 in previously appropriated funds. You remember the police station said that they had 75,000 in 911 grants. And they asked for basically 50%. They said that can be 50% funding to work on their HVAC. And then there was $6,200 towards electric panels and $6,300 towards kitchen upgrades. So I figured all those things together and thought that basically supposed that we had call it $2.3 million of available funds. And so in that planning figure, I said, what if we went and asked for half of the capital? Keep wanting to say the word sustainment. Do you know the capital account, the capital rainy day fund? Stabilization. I do sustainment every single day, so that's the word that's stuck in my head. So I basically said, let's consider our capital budget being about $411,000. Basically, CapEx bringing our expectation back up to normal, almost, because it was a lot more taken for demo. So out of that 2.3 million, I tried to say, how can we first fund all of the priorities that the department heads gave us? So that is for Dave Dickey, his number 1 and number 2 was the Forestry 3 tanker for 225, and the tanker 1, that's the 600K, the 3,000. So I didn't have an answer for the 600K. That's why I thought maybe we do look at a lease for that one, and that roughly is about 100, based on the quotes that you had emailed us, that'd be about 109,000, a little bit more than you were talking about for an $80,000 perpetual, but 100. We basically go with our hat in our hand and say, of the only leases that we're asking for, we would like to get this $600,000 priority 2 tanker for $109,000 a year.
Can I make a point about the tanker?
Sure.
Is I advise, we in advisory have been literally for months now kicking around the idea of trying to arrive at pilot for the light department. If the light department pays certain number of thousands of dollars per year here and there on different projects and the like. What I am thinking of recommending is, and it may be a win for everybody, is to ask the light department if they would do a pilot for the tanker, either the the $600,000 tanker or the the medium sized tanker, and just do the 180, let's say it's $180,000 a year, is ask them, approach them if they would do $180,000 a year for 4 years, and not have the town, and the idea being not having the town ask for any money for billing that the town does or any other projects. It's just that one project, and it would be good for them because it would be a set dollar amount, no more, no less. So you set dollar amount. It would be good for the town because it frees up free cash. We can get more bang for the buck, so to speak. I think that if if Adam or if the board was to approach the light department, they may be very amenable to that.
We can do a joint motion or otherwise, but I mean, I use the Jerry Maguire quote all the time, like you had me at hello. They do that every single year anyway. Historically, now I know they got a lot going on right now in terms of their own different capital.
I believe they
things.
said they'll only do a year-to-year thing because they don't know what their revenues are and their incomes
But they
are coming
do.
through.
They do it every year, but they would usually choose, hey, we'd like to contribute towards this. We'd like to contribute towards that. I understand years ago that it may not have had strings attached to it, or basically an earmark to say, here's 150 and 150,000 in cash, but this is where we would like it to go. I think if we wind up saying, this is how you can help us,
It'd be of great help. I think it'd be of great help.
I don't think that based on other things that they have going on right now, I wouldn't think that they would take it on as an additional. But if we asked them, hey, normally you help us with these kinds of things, what if we asked very specifically for help with
It's a set dollar.
Yeah.
amount, and it's set for several years in advance, so it's not,
because it does change.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I know their revenues swing year to year a great deal, and they may not be able to do it, but I think that if we could just ask on that one item, or maybe one smaller item, it would be of great help.
Okay. That's a great point. And it could be, that could be where, Adam starts throwing stuff at us. We wind up saying, hey, but the good news is we've already talked to Light and Water. So those are the two priority things. And then DPW, and then I just want to go through and say how I would think that we can have our cake and eat it too. We'll call it course of action, cake and eat it too. Priority 1 and 2 for Bob Sozik was his 7-ton 6-wheel plow. Priority 1, that was 200,000, have that come out of ARPA. His priority 2 was the software for work orders and otherwise, and that was about 38,000. Have that come out of our capital budget, that's 37. So have that come out of the capital. So those are the big 2 customers that are coming to us to say, not only do I have a bunch of requirements, but here are my priorities. So to go back through the Gilman Waite, fund that out of free cash. Town Common out of ARPA. The Forestry Tanker out of ARPA. Forestry 2 truck, 185,000, ARPA. New fire station professional study, ARPA. And I know I'm saying ARPA a lot, but I'll kind of go through what the totals are at the end, and you'll see how it kind of makes sense and it isn't a shock to Adam. Let's see, the forestry Argo. What does Argo mean?
It's an amphibious rescue vehicle.
Amphibious.
It can go land or
Okay.
water.
I
or
just didn't
land.
know what it stood for, but anyway, that's 75,000. I would either recommend deferring to FY25 or switch that based on oh wait.
I guess as we're looking at some of the ARPA stuff, and I know there's approximately 1.8 in there. What other things, and I know Adam said, what other things does he have sitting on waiting that he's thinking he's using ARPA for too?
So
Who just, let me rephrase that. Who makes the decision on what ARPA is used on in Templeton? I don't know, so I'm asking.
select board,
I wasn't sure who makes the decision on
the select
if
board.
it's a vote on the select board. or
Yep,
if it's a
it doesn't go to town
administrator.
meeting. It's
No, I didn't know if it was a town administrator or the select board. I didn't know which it.
right. So priority wise, he's been helping whatever requests have come to the select board so far. He has been helping that process along.
Okay.
And once that decision has been made, it winds up then going to Kelly and she partitions.
Mhm.
She fences that amount. I do want to go through each of them just so you can, hear, or if you're ticking along, but to answer your question, out of the 1.8, I would make recommendations of 1.1 million for this capital year, and a bunch of it seems, we have, what are total, we have set, I'm including roofs and other things with that, but we have 7.7 million in requirements that came in front of us. Now, some of those are going to be debt exclusion, or could be debt exclusion, like the 2.3 million to replace the roof. That's a part of that. But anyway, so of the 1.8 million, I've got at least 1.1 coming out of that, which leaves Adam, for Adam's consideration or any other consideration, that leaves $677,000 that still needs to be spent within the next couple of years, by no later than fiscal 27. TCTV, all their stuff, that we're basically just gonna fund it as indicated. It's coming out of his retained earnings. 2.3, that's got, I mean, at this point, I would think that we would make a recommendation for either override or debt exclusion. If we wanted that even in our report, but right now there's no, we would have no way
We'd have
that, yeah. 490, the school district basically said, you know, we would fund that out of our budget, so that would be out of their E&D or whatever ESSER money they have left. Let's get back to our spending, the police vehicle. Adam basically said he's gonna take that on, whether it's tax levy or meals tax. He basically, I think he told this committee, I got his cruiser, you know, 63 grand for the cruiser. 75 grand for the other half of the 150 that it would take to do the HVAC, ARPA. Cardiac pump station, also think that's got to go to debt exclusion or USDA loan or otherwise. DPW, his first priority, 200,000 for his 7-ton ARPA. Software, free cash. Skid steer, 107,000 ARPA. So the next couple, engineering, 400,000 for engineering, drainage work. I think that those should be targeted towards a grant. A lot of that stuff could be grant funded for studies or otherwise. We just had $200,000 possible coming into the community that we understood within this last week. But I think that those two studies or the drainage work, I would try and go after a grant for that. His Ford 550 swap loader, free cash, 163. The mower, 14 grand, free cash. Electric panels, since there's already funds towards that, we would just fund the rest at 6,300 out of free cash. Window replacement, I would think that since Green Communities has about 71,000, I don't know why they couldn't put, if it's Green Communities, if it's energy efficient windows that we're trying to install in town hall, I would recommend that the 16 grand be funded out of the $71,000 they have in Green Communities.
I thought that
Yeah.
program was discontinued.
I think that those monies that are in that account are already being, last that I remember, they were already being expended for something that we had already gone out to bid for not even that long ago that had gotten accepted.
Okay.
So I think the monies that are in there already have a plan. You would have to talk with Adam about that because
Okay.
I don't remember how the grant worked out, but we're not getting any more from that. I think that was the last disbursement, and whatever amounts left in that account has already been planned out, if I remember correctly.
I would still go after grant funds.
Right.
For that, energy efficiency, there's got to be a grant out there for that.
Right.
Kitchen upgrades, there's already 6,300 toward it. I would use ARPA funds in the same spirit when I was talking about what are the original use for these funds. We're trying to make that facility, from emergency management perspective, a reaction facility, to be able to, whether it's cooking meals, to take on people for warming center, cooling center. But I would put, I know it was like a large 200,000 was kind of on the upper end for the plumbing, electrical and otherwise, but I would fund that with ARPA, 200,000. Paving, all out of free cash. If Adam came back and said, I really don't want to use any of the CapEx, then I would take the town hall and the DPW paving and put that onto ARPA. So that's about another 100,000. That would still leave $500,000 in ARPA funds left. So, and then I don't have any recommendations on Gilman Waite, because I think we could wait to see what CPC is going
Well, I
to
think,
do.
yeah, it
Yeah,
really makes sense to
I
do.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So all told, we would expend 409,000 in free cash, and the capital
CapEx.
stabilization We would expend 1.1 out of ARPA, remaining 677, and then all other previously appropriated funds. If we do that, the only things that we are not able to get the team are the DPW studies, the $600,000 tanker, but we would have a pretty good idea of how we could do it. There are actually two different ways, either a lease or going to the light and water department. And then, you know, whatever you wanted to do with the forestry Argo, we wanted to swap that out with something. But based on that, we can actually have a pretty good capital year, I think. And start to expend these ARPA funds where we really haven't collectively as a town decided it. The only money that we've spent out of it right now has been for personnel. Based on the lack of personnel that we have right now.
I think the only thing that I'd probably do, and looking at it, I think that's excellent, and you did a nice job putting it all together. I think that the only thing I might do a little bit different would be on the paving to potentially take, whether it's two of them or the $100,000 out of the ARPA and take that and use that money on the 100,000 or whatever towards the, whether it's the $600,000 tank or if the chief can go 1,000 gallons less into a $2,000 four-wheel drive for the 385, then I think that by using those, you're probably looking at about a $90,000 lease payment on that. And rather than, again, continuing to, push down the road, if that's something that he feels he could go forward, I think that would be at least a possibility. Yes, it would come out of does tag your capital going forward, but it also, you can't take it out of ARPA because they don't want to incur debt with it. So you're really moving forward by switching the pavement on a couple of them over. It allows you to have that $100,000 out of free cash to put towards a lease. Because I'll as much as I like the thought of the light and water, I think that I don't think they'll commit to too many years at a time. I think they're going to, I think having, and I actually even think that the chief might have approached them just as a off the record talk to kind of see what's what. And I think that they only want to do a year to year because they don't know, they don't even make their decision on this stuff. I don't believe until like May. So they're kind of, I think that's their only, they're open to doing something every single year. And like you said, it'd be nice, it's a set amount, they know it. But I think that they're might be hesitant. I don't know if we'd want to, I don't know how that would work on that. That's my only.
All I'm saying is we
Right,
should at
on
least
that.
approach them.
Right, and but like I said, I do think they've been approached a little bit on it, maybe not officially, I don't think, but I think that it's something that we'd have to, it'd be good to have an alternate possibility if they're not willing to go that route.
Yeah, I can't see them committing to a yearly thing for.
Well, all I'm saying
We'll
is
just take
maybe
over
Adam
the
should
personnel.
approach them and talk with them and see what happens. My other suggestion as well is I think the paving or the HVAC, maybe we could ask either Ann Goby or Jonathan Zlotnick for an earmark. I mean, they've given us in the range of $200,000 to $300,000 in years past. Maybe we could ask for an earmark on either the paving or the HVAC. That might help.
Yeah, so our report would be to defer those. And then offer, much like we would with the roof or something like that, offer recommendations for what a possible funding source could be.
Yes.
Because we're basically trying to say, what budget do we have that we know of? Because it's not our $300,000 where, they just gave us a figure. But for something like that to say, well, we don't know how to fund that, so we're going to defer these. But again, it's the shell game to say, if we're going to say for all the paving or some of the paving, based on how we're going to decrement what we know we have available, where are we going to put that money into? Does it contribute to a lease situation? Does it contribute more money? What was the total paving amount?
It's like 200,
Do you have to know how many leases we have right now?
I don't, I know we have the fire truck lease. I don't know if there's any other ones.
Because I know.
Yeah, 176.
At one point,
I think it's just,
it got moved out of my budget, so I know at one point we had. There was a 3-year and a 5-year. There were 3 of them at one point. I thought one is gone. I just didn't know how many we had left.
I know.
If one's gonna
Carter
run
worked
out,
on most of
I know,
those.
I don't know if there's one ready to run out.
I want to say the fire truck lease had one more year.
I was gonna say-
Chief Dickey had said that.
Just thinking of the years of their equipment, I don't.
Yeah.
And that's part of the,
And that's what where we do it. I know that's part of our, when we get recommendations from finance is when we've got one coming off.
Well, I'm
We almost-
wondering if
we
got
wanna
one
make sure to
follow-up,
have
we
one.
Can add one and just continue it.
And that's what we've
Yeah.
always
Cause
kind of
it's been in
done.
the budget, so
Right.
it's,
It's I mean,
Yeah.
well, part of talking through that 600,000, for the rest of them, I think there's a path to get the 200, the 185. I think there's a path to actually get those. Cash in hand, cash and carry for those, but for the 600,000. That may be a situation, if we're thinking it's gonna be 110,000 for a lease. And one of them's gonna drop off, maybe that's where we wind up saying. Because what happens is we're gonna make the recommendations, and it's made to the select board. The select board doesn't really consider the finalized product until we wind up going through that budget book. And Adam offers, here's how I'm going to be able to fund what you've asked me to do. And that smushes everything together. All of the budgets, the debt considerations, and then whatever the capital committee has done. So he winds up saying, here's how I can do it. Part of that process is his realization of, oh, we do have one that's coming off in a year or 2 years. And he says, you know what? I guess we can try and take it on the chin, maybe new growth. Maybe new growth will be able to do it. We didn't get in front of the assessors board in time to talk about overlay. But maybe if we know that we're already going to be short $100,000 in the operating budget, he already goes into the assessors to say, this is what I'm looking for this year. This is what for a consideration. We didn't have that time. We didn't have that kind of flexibility this year because
You
you've
also
already
have-
made your decision.
You also have flexibility in the levy limit.
Yep.
It's about $100,000, I think. but-
I don't know. Are you talking about new growth or?
Talking about, the overall budget was under the levy
Yeah.
limit by about, I think it was $90,000. So you got $90,000 you can bring forward that you didn't have
Okay.
before.
you look like you have a question, Justice.
No, I don't have a question. Were you talking about the excess capacity? from Year to year,
Yes.
Yeah.
We have been conservative. There's been
right?
right.
yeah, she doesn't like to push it to the levy limit.
I know.
I just, yeah,
It's been discussed for many years, and I think there was only one year where we really had a hard discussion. It was during Carter's time to say, this is where our conservatism pays off, and I don't think we wound up needing it. It was in one of the years where it was tight because of trying to struggle against the school budget.
yeah.
So we've had the discussions, but we never had it so much prior to that decision making, where it was like, this is what we're gonna plan to do. So when we develop our recommendations, we're gonna, we've got the stuff that is, doesn't impact the taxpayers. And I'm thinking in the structure of the document that we normally publish. I think we know how those things are gonna shake out. Sewer didn't have anything other than just hit a heads up about Crowdy Ave. TCTV, I think, is the only ones where it's taxpayer funded, so no one has any issues with those, right?
No,
All right, so that one will appear on the report like that. Then our recommendations are going to be based on our budget and priority, what we think we can accomplish. Do we want to is everyone in realization right now that ARPA is going to be on the table in terms of recommendations? Or do people not want to touch ARPA? Because, I mean, what I briefed to you guys,
I think it should be because
think it should be.
ultimately
Okay.
we need to use it and
Exactly.
to use it towards capital expenses is, I mean,
And then what, are we gonna be scrambling at the end because we didn't use it?
yeah, all of a
Let's-
sudden,
Yeah,
But it depends
Yeah.
on whether we get the money for the Main Street Bridge too. Because that was kind of the focus.
I considered that. So where, if I told you, based on what some of the math that I did, I said 677 left. I considered some of the bigger projects that we had.
Mhm.
I didn't want to dip below 500,000 because we're still a couple years out and, things change. But also, some of the dire things that, Dave came to us with, I thought, all right, well, maybe we need to take care of some of these things this capital year. But going back to your point, Holly, I don't know what kind of considerations. I know that we just had that $200,000 realization this past week. Adam sent something to Senator Goby to ask about it. It's not money in hand yet, but it's basically the state's kind of shaking their couch cushions right now, and they're coming up with some additional funding sources. So I don't know what that does for us, but if we make recommendations that brings us down to just under $700,000, is that still a good? Does it allow us maneuverability given Main Street, the Main Street project?
He was saying that if we get the Main Street money, he would be comfortable spending about 500,000 earmarked for capital. Maybe he's leaving a little more.
Well, less than what I'm talking about. So I'm talking about 1.1 million of it. So
well, we do
based
have to
on what
spend
you're
it
saying,
eventually.
Maybe he's being conservative with trying to leave a little in there for other things, not quite sure.
I don't know. I also think,
Well, the Main Street Bridge would also be eligible, even if we didn't get the money, you could take a loan on the Main Street Bridge also, correct?
Mhm.
I mean, and it does, and in a project like that certainly
Yeah.
could be spread out over a longer period of
Mhm.
time than some of these projects that we're putting forward to use ARPA, so.
I'd rather accept the risk and use it for things that our community needs. And we have a spectrum with this list right here that you've got. We're able to get everything that we've been asked for this year and still have money to put towards the big item. I'd rather take the risk and spend it on that rather than make sure that $1.3 million was still available in a bank account for the bridge. I don't think my personal feeling on the bridge is I don't think that it should fall on 100% on the taxpayers. I really don't feel like it's part of the infrastructure. I really feel like the state needs to, it's not on 101 or 2 alpha, 2A. I get that. I know that it's not 100% the state coming in, swooping in with their cash to help out. And it's not, there's no way Chapter 90 could even take care of it. But I don't think that it should solely be placed on the backs of Templetonians, if that makes sense. And, just one single person here, I'd rather take the risk on the bridge and get some of these capital items that we need that will last for a while.
I also have the feeling that Governor Baker on the way out is gonna sign off on that. Sounds like it just needs a signature. He's got between now and January 5th to do that.
And these are recommendations.
I
We're in
think
the
it's
middle of
gonna
budget. Yeah.
I think it's gonna happen.
Now, the recommendations on the ARPA funds, realistically, on the ARPA portions, if need be, the board could move on those at any point, because those funds are already,
Right.
those aren't something that need to be. Because my concern on some stuff that we're looking to use on ARPA, especially like on some of the apparatus stuff.
Yeah.
Some of the fire and DPW equipment right now on the trucks, you're looking at, I'm looking at spec'ing an ambulance and I'm looking at a 2-year out, almost 18 months. So where the ARPA funds are gonna need to be spent
Mhm.
prior to, we may need to,
Gauge what the lead.
we may need to go out and sooner rather than later to, on some of those to actually purchase, like on the things you're using on some of the ARPA, if you're using it on a forestry tanker, you may, the board may need to act before April's budget season just to get these extra few months into the swing. Obviously, it's something the board could do because the funding's already
Yeah.
there. You're not waiting for next fiscal year on some of those. On the ARPA portions, some of them. I mean, some things you can, obviously, you're not on a timeline, but on some of them, if it's gonna be lead time on vehicles, sometimes some of the vehicles are taking a little bit
Yeah.
of time. They're not, it's not like it used to be on how quick you can get some
Yeah.
things.
Well, let's talk through that. So if we make a recommendation before the end of the year and we're on, the 28th. We're only talking a couple of weeks now, which is crazy. I mean, I can't believe it's already the 14th. We're making a recommendation for the end of the year, report, here you
Mhm.
go. The items that wind up going through the budget process primarily are going to be the ones where, it's a lease or it's free cash. Or things that are gonna go to town meeting for ultimate approval. The ARPA ones gonna come out and they're gonna become part of,
They go to the board at that point.
correct. So there's the request for use of ARPA funds and our report winds up becoming the appendix to that, to say on the very next meeting to say, remember the capital report, here are the things that they recommended for ARPA. Hey, select board, it's for your action now.
Well, that's what I mean.
You're
Yeah,
right.
as,
So that's
as chairman,
January.
you need to make sure that,
Yeah.
that at least you know that there are timelines on
Yep.
some pieces, so it gets spent in time.
Well-
Because you don't want to run into that last minute where you're trying to, well, where's the truck, where's the payment? You
I'm uncomfortable.
you don't want to run into that.
No,
I'm kind of uncomfortable that we haven't spent a lot of it already, where I've seen other communities already have things where they've had groundbreaking ceremonies for ARPA projects or otherwise. So Tim and I have talked about that to
yeah,
say,
what are we saving
We
it
spent
for when
we
there's
spent quite a
when
bit
there's
bought
an
things.
expiration
Yeah.
date on it?
and these things, they're not like fifth and sixth priority. Some of these things are first and second.
And they've been there a
priorities.
while.
Right.
And they've been there.
They've been on the plan for a while
We've
and
seen them
we see them
recurring on this
every year.
committee every single year, and they date back probably 5 or
Right.
6
Right,
years.
so to have the funds sitting there and be able to actually do it
Clean up a lot
and
of it.
clean up some of these things. I mean, even the parking lots, they've been there, the fire apparatus, some of those have been there for every single time I've been on capital planning and it's, and I
Yeah.
haven't been on that long, but I see them every single year.
Mhm.
And I think to be able to knock them off, I understand, rainy day, but the ARPA funds really on a rainy day because they need to be spent.
By FY 26, I think you have to commit them in only a few more fiscal cycles.
I was gonna say, I think it was, I thought it was 25, I thought they had, so I mean, I think.
Yeah, I think maybe you have
originally
to
they gave
commit
us
in 25 and
3
spend it
years
all
to
by
spend it.
26.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's how it is.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd have to
originally it was
double
3
check,
years,
but,
and
yeah.
then they did a little shuffling, but you can't plan on them shuffling it, because at some point they're gonna say, okay, we'll take it back because
You're
we,
gonna lose it.
and I just think that, I think that's an important thing on the board side too. I understand waiting to see what a project does, waiting to see, but you can only,
You can only save for a rainy day for so long.
Yeah.
It's gotta go.
and once it's, I mean, because there's also a process, once you guys end up, then you get the reporting process on the end, so there ends up with all these different
Yeah.
components to it that need to get, you don't want to be trying to do it all in the last minute.
Yeah, and some of these, I think, public safety, they don't maybe not relate to the conditions that created the ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act. But some of them are, like the kitchen, to try and work on that facility. I think it's important. So whether it's a kitchen or a truck or otherwise, these are tangible items that we've got. Speaking from the capital perspective, it's a windfall. If we used half of the CapEx in the 300 in the free cash, we would still only have $400,000. That wouldn't get us a couple of these things.
Yeah. And that's,
We would have some real tough decisions, whereas we're able to turn it around and say, not only were we able to get the things that the department heads wanted, we were able to get them all. Or make recommendations for a very few of the larger price tag items to say, we're not gonna be able to do it within our left and right limits, but here's a way we can do it. And it is, a priority of that department. I'm, mostly talking about the tanker.
It's really a once in a generation opportunity.
Yeah. And rather than be scared or pull away for that because, it's a lot of money, seize the opportunity. But even if, if Adam's recommendation or if he really projects severe or high risk to Main Street, like if he's not able to retain 1.3 million for that. If he really feels strong that's high risk, that'll definitely impact what our board can make a recommendation for ARPA funds,
What
basically
issues have been
cuts it
created
off.
at this point with the Bridge on the River going as it is? I don't know, has it created any issues for, I mean, I know it's not convenient, obviously, with a two-way stop sign, but is it created any public safety issues that would come up, or does anything come to the board on major problems that as a result of how it is
No.
right now?
Not to the board, but again, from a day-to-day perspective, I don't know.
I don't know, I just wonder what's coming.
Siemens got a dog in the fight, public safety, fire. I don't know if fires had to drive, a different way around based on weight or whatever. I haven't heard any restrictions based on the one lane. All I know is that, the town and then, Light and Water are hand in hand on this from, constructing a new bridge along with the water going across the bridge. So.
I just wondering what the.
Yep.
No, I think, realistically, I think it's a good, are we meeting next week? Is that,
Yeah, the 21st.
Yeah.
I think if we take this information and come with,
No, 22nd.
what we recommend out of this, what we recommend out of that,
Okay.
I think it'd be pretty, I think we'd all be pretty close on where we are, I think. I don't think any of us are too far off on this project or that project, or not using ARPA or using ARPA.
It's gonna come down to 2 or 3 items, I think.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think there's a couple that
Shift around
could,
maybe.
may shift a little bit, just to shift a little bit for timing wise versus, I think that would be my only.
Let me start
have a problem
let me
using
start the draft report, and I'm gonna structure it the way that we talked about this evening. The TCTV stuff, then we're gonna make our recommendations for free cash. And we'll need to make sure we fill in what the priorities are for those things. And we can swap on that. And then we're gonna make recommendations for ARPA, which is, not usual for our report, but definitely good. It sounds like everyone wants to make sure that we're
No, I think
giving some kind of way forward for that. And the best way forward. And then also include a section as a FYI to say, here are some big things that are coming. And that's the studies studies in water work that Bob was talking about, the roof, the playing field.
Yeah.
I don't even know if we should include the playing field, because Chris was talking about they're gonna take that on, like that's their purview, their E&D or otherwise. But anyway, the structure of it, we'll make recommendations to say, here are some items that may not be adequately funded through capital that may have to be considered for debt exclusion, external loans, or possibly an override. So I'll start that structure, and then we'll all come next week prepared to kind of finalize what we want, how we want to take each one of these and what bucket they're gonna, out of those 4 buckets, where we want to put those in there. And in any deferments, the deferments really would come under the free cash area, I think.
You have an email of the draft.
I'm gonna email this out. Now, I do want to touch base with Holly. I went off on a complete different direction than the sheet that she was keeping. You just saw the one that I had, but I just needed to be able to kind of visualize in my mind, what do we have available and how do we buy everything? So I will email that to Holly, but I also email it to you guys, to everybody here, so you can at least use this as a tool to see everything. And I did include the rec 25 to 120K. I didn't put it as a solid number because it was so low end, high end.
And that's the sheet that you got here, right?
Correct.
So there's no issue with email.
Yeah, and I put the priorities at least will jump out at you. You can start to put priorities in there as well. And we'll have to put for the free cash ones, we'll have to assign each one a priority. So if we have, as you're working through it, if there are 10 things that we're gonna pay for on free cash, a kind of assign where you think the priorities were. And we'll be able to finalize that in our next meeting, and then I'll be able to come up with a draft report.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Do you, for the lease part of things, whether it's, I know, whether it's talking to Light and Water, but do you want to make a recommendation on like a cap on a lease? Or, do we want to be prepared to say, here's $250,000 worth of leases we think you have, or do we make a recommendation of, we think you should consider at least $100,000 lease?
Well, I think that, I mean, ultimately, it'd be good to know if something's coming off if something's coming off. The other thing, I think that we,
I don't do the
There's
leases.
nothing coming off soon. I think it's next year. I think it's another
So if
full
we're
year.
paying this year and it's coming off next
No, we're
year,
paying next year.
okay,
the other possibility too is depending on if he seriously thinks that the 2,000 gallons would work instead of the
what's that, yeah,
3,000. You're looking at a difference between 600 to 385, dropping that to 385. So that potentially, rather than doing you could take shift those two from free cash, the two pavements into ARPA. And then use that
I
to
agree.
actually lease
Yep,
that
I
and make that as
totally-
one of a $93,000 lease payment. And that's out of your free cash. It's not the 80,000 that you talked about. And then if all of a sudden, that Light and Water, as their approach, but potentially they decide that maybe they change their mind and want to do that. They could literally pay the lease payment. You've got the lease payment. It's the same payment every single year for, you know what the payments are already. But we've put it forward as part of what we got for capital items and free cash. And gives us time to approach them because they may not make a decision till May, but we've put it forward as our report goes. And they could literally shift it and take it over. And
Yeah.
then worst case scenarios, it goes back to capital and we say, okay, you really have 93,000
Yeah.
extra.
I do see a path to that, Tom, taking the 185 off the table for ARPA. You'd have to come up with another 200,000 to make that 385. Maybe
Just the possibility because you can't do the lease out of the ARPA one, but you could shift the parking lots from free
Yep.
cash to ARPA.
I think there's a way
Do
to
do the paving and that gives you that 175, 185 in,
Mhm.
maybe you only do, you cut your lease, so you could do a double payment on it if you got you don't necessarily only have to do it with what they propose. If you say, look, I want to pay X amount, what's your percentage? That may
Yeah.
juggle the,
And I would write it into our report like that,
Right.
alternate one.
well, I
If
just think,
the fire chief opts for the 2K 4-wheel drive,
and that's something I'm sure he
then
can be
here
asked.
is,
and-
here is a path to, minimal.
Cause that would make it
We would-
easier
we
going
would-
forward than having $100 and
Yeah.
something thousand lease on the
Yeah.
table all the time. We'd have it going forward out of the
Yep.
capital, but you'd have it on a little bit less price,
Right.
lower price truck,
Yep.
but still able to potentially, I think, to do the
Yeah.
job.
Okay. I like that. Alt one.
And that gets one more vehicle off the list that's always been on that keeps coming up on the overall and over and over on the list. And the parking lots fall into ARPA, you're not having any, you're not rushing to spend it on a vehicle because, pavement's pavement.
Also, the parking lot could also be the possibility of an earmark.
Right, yeah, you could,
It could be like alternate two or.
right, I mean, you could juggle it any which way. I'm just thinking that way you're not committing to they're gonna do it, but you're knocking one more thing off the table. and still using the ARPA funds for infrastructure with the paving.
Okay. So, oh, yeah, I'm just taking the note on moving paving around to where it best fits. We make a recommendation for it, but we just say whatever's convenient to put that in there, prioritizing the priorities of, our priority is to make sure that the public safety and DPW get the vehicles that they require. Move paving as needed. Okay. What else? What else can we talk today? Good way forward?
Yeah, I think that's a good spot to kind of move forward on it and,
Okay.
and, you know, for the next meeting and
Yeah.
nail stuff down, you bring forward a draft report with, you know, some places that you can make some, you know, some edits on it if we need to move things, shift things, you kind of, you know, fun of computers, it's easy to do.
Okay,
You know, so that way I think, you know, and we can,
Really, I also want to thank you for getting the leasing information.
Oh, no
Yeah,
problem.
that
They-
was
the
Very,
two of them,
very
I
helpful.
I was surprised to hear from me on late at night, but they got it back to me and they got a hold of the companies and they, you know, it's a credit to Dave and Bob. They both stepped up and got the information, and so it's certainly appreciated from them too. You know, they understand that the more information they can give us, the easier, you know, the,
Better chances they're gonna. get
yeah, it is
Right?
ultimately, and you know, that it's,
okay. I will, I'm working on emailing that out right now. And then Holly, I'll work with you how we can merge these or how whatever we can do with that spreadsheet.
Okay.
I don't want to ruin.
Every year it gets a little better, so.
sending in like mine I threw out last year, huh? What are you trying to say?
No. The first year I was on capital planning, it's,
Well, it's better too that we're not reviewing $2,000 items and having 70 items like we did one year too. I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah, if you can make a copy of that.
You know, we're
Yeah.
talking
You need
items
copies
that
of these?
are
Oh, I
capital
have this in my
and
email.
not
Okay.
items that are,
Should be in your
That's
budget.
fine.
yeah, photocopy just.
I got the same email that everybody else
Yeah.
got.
Just,
Right.
I think that,
Good with that.
do we want to
Yeah, make a motion to adjourn.
make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the table to adjourn. Any other comment before one last go around? Hearing none on the motion to adjourn, how do you vote? Justice?
Yes.
Noel?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Cheryl?
yes.
Holly?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well.